They didn't just act tough, they were tough. These are the men who didn't need stunt doubles or fake bravado. From real-life war heroes to barroom brawlers, these actors brought raw grit to every role because they lived it off-camera too. They weren't shaped by Hollywood. They stormed into it on their own terms. This is the untold truth of the toughest actors in film history. No scripts, no illusions, just pure, unshakable toughness. 1. Kirk Douglas. Before the fame, the fortune, or the film sets, Kirk Douglas was just a hungry kid from the slums of New York. Born Isur Danielovich to impoverished Jewish immigrants, Douglas knew hardship from the start. His family was so poor, they often went without food. To survive, he hustled from a young age, selling snacks to mill workers just to earn a few coins. That same grit would define the rest of his life. But toughness wasn't just a mindset for Douglas, it was a way of life. Before stepping in front of a camera, he was a competitive wrestler, earning a scholarship to St. Lawrence University purely on athletic merit. This wasn't staged entertainment. It was grueling, physical, collegiate-level competition. It taught Douglas discipline, endurance, and how to take a hit without backing down. Then came World War II. Douglas enlisted in the U.S. Navy and served as a communications officer aboard a submarine chaser, a small, fast ship designed to hunt enemy U-boats. The confined quarters, constant threat of attack, and punishing missions tested every man on board. Douglas was injured during service and honorably discharged in 1944. But instead of talking about heroism, he got back to work, this time in Hollywood. His film career didn't soften him. If anything, it sharpened his edge. While filming Spartacus, Douglas trained extensively with real ex-gladiators and wrestlers to give the fight scenes true grit. When a stunt coordinator advised him against doing a dangerous fall, Douglas ignored him, did the stunt anyway, got injured, and returned to set just 2 days later. Co-stars and directors alike found him intimidating. Stanley Kubrick, known for being notoriously controlling, admitted, "When Kirk decided something was going to happen, it happened. Period." Burt Lancaster, himself a former circus acrobat, said, "Kirk doesn't just act a scene, he attacks it." Douglas's toughness didn't fade with age. In 1991, he survived a devastating helicopter crash that killed 2 others and left him with severe back injuries. In his 70s at the time, he endured months of painful rehab and won. Just 5 years later, he suffered a massive stroke that impaired his speech. Most would have retreated from public life. Douglas chose therapy, recovery, and ultimately published a book about the experience. Director Howard Hawks summed it up best. There were plenty of actors who looked tough, but Kirk actually was tough. You could see it in the eyes, and he was right. Douglas didn't need to prove anything. His life spoke louder than any role he ever played. 2. Steve McQueen. He wasn't just Hollywood's king of cool, he was the real deal. Born into chaos, abandoned by his father, and beaten by his stepfather, McQueen's early life was all about survival. Reform schools couldn't tame him. The streets didn't break him. By 14, he'd already run away from home. And not long after, he joined the U.S. Marine Corps, a move that nearly got him discharged more than once. He was demoted 7 times for insubordination and once spent 41 days in the brig. But when a fellow group of Marines plunged into icy waters during an Arctic drill, it was McQueen who saved 5 of them. This wasn't a man who played hero, he was one. Long before his name lit up movie posters, McQueen worked as a lumberjack, an oil rigger, even a carnival barker. But Hollywood couldn't contain him either. He didn't just act out danger, he lived it. He performed nearly all of his own stunts, from high-speed car chases in Bullet to motorcycle scenes in The Great Escape. Studios begged him to slow down. He hit the gas instead. The famous fence jump in The Great Escape? That was one of the few stunts he didn't do. Not because he couldn't, but because the insurance company wouldn't allow it. Off-screen, he raced motorcycles and cars professionally, often under fake names to dodge studio restrictions. He nearly won the 12 Hours of Sebring endurance race in 1970, with a cast on his foot from a crash just weeks before. His stunt double once said, "Steve wasn't playing at being a racer or a tough guy, he was genuinely both." He even performed dangerous stunts with real fire in the towering inferno and nearly drowned during a river scene in the Sand Pebbles because he refused to use a double. Director John Sturges put it bluntly, the problem with Steve wasn't getting him to do dangerous stunts, it was stopping him from doing ones that could kill him. And when police told him he was on Charles Manson's hit list, McQueen didn't flinch. He carried a loaded Magnum with him everywhere instead of hiring bodyguards. Racing legend Mario Andretti said it best. Hollywood had actors playing tough guys, but Steve actually was what most of them were pretending to be. 3. Audie Murphy. When you think of Hollywood's toughest actors, names like John Wayne or Clint Eastwood may come to mind. But the most dangerous man to ever grace the silver screen wasn't a towering cowboy or a grizzled action hero. He was 5'5", baby-faced and often mistaken for a kid. Yet behind those unassuming looks was Audie Murphy, the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II, and arguably the deadliest actor in Hollywood history. Murphy's story defies belief. At just 19 years old, he single-handedly held off an entire German company in France, alone, wounded, low on ammunition, and outgunned. He climbed atop a burning tank destroyer, used its machine gun until it jammed, and then called in artillery on his own position to halt the advance. For this act of almost superhuman bravery, he received the Medal of Honor. But that was just one entry in a long list of battlefield feats. Before his 21st birthday, Murphy had earned every U.S. military combat award for valor, including the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. He also received honors from France and Belgium, totaling 28 decorations. His combat record includes destroying tanks, leading charges against fortified positions, and eliminating dozens of enemy soldiers, often while wounded. Military historians estimate he personally killed between 240 and 300 enemy combatants. That number isn't a movie script, it's real. Hollywood came calling after Life magazine featured him on its cover. But directors didn't know what to do with him. He looked too gentle, too innocent. Security guards even turned him away during his first screen test, refusing to believe this young man was the war hero everyone had been buzzing about. But he didn't need to look tough. He was. His most famous film, To Hell and Back, saw Murphy play himself in a reenactment of his wartime experiences. But here's the twist. The filmmakers toned down many of his actual exploits, fearing audiences would dismiss them as unbelievable. Director Jesse Hibbs later said, "We had to leave out some of Audie's real feats. No one would have believed them happened." Off camera, Murphy carried heavy scars. He battled severe PTSD, often sleeping with a loaded pistol under his pillow and waking up from violent nightmares. His second wife, Wanda Hendricks, once said, "In public he was soft-spoken and shy, but I've seen him wake up from nightmares as someone I didn't recognize, a hardened killer with instincts that terrified me." Despite the trauma, Murphy kept his composure in Hollywood. But once, during a heated argument with a businessman, his combat instincts took over. Witnesses say his reaction was so swift and deadly serious, the man froze in fear and later admitted, "I suddenly realized I was looking into the eyes of someone who could kill me without hesitation." What makes Murphy's legacy so unique is that he never wanted to be a tough guy on screen. He preferred gentle roles, romantic leads, comedies, anything that helped him escape the brutality of his past. But make no mistake, behind that modest demeanor stood a man who had survived more real combat and taken more lives than any actor before or since. 4. Mickey Rourke. For Mickey Rourke, toughness wasn't an act, it was his way of life. He rose to fame in the 1980s with a brooding mix of talent and danger, but Hollywood never felt like home. At the height of his career, Rourke walked away from acting to pursue professional boxing. The choice left his face shattered and his future uncertain. Multiple surgeries weren't for vanity, they were survival. Off-screen, Rourke's life was a storm of arrests, fights, and infamous feuds. But his comeback in The Wrestler wasn't just a role, it was a raw reflection of his real-life battles. Battered but unbroken, Rourke remains a symbol of chaos, pain, and resilience. A man too wild to be scripted. 5. Anthony Quinn. Anthony Quinn's on-screen power wasn't learned in acting school. It was forged through hardship, sweat, and survival. Born in Chihuahua, Mexico, during the height of the Mexican Revolution, Quinn's earliest memories were of gunfire, soldiers, and fleeing with his family to escape the violence. After immigrating to the U.S., they settled in the poorest neighborhoods of Los Angeles, where young Anthony began working before the age of 10. Unlike actors who chiseled their physiques in gyms, Quinn built his body through real labor. He worked as a butcher's assistant, a construction laborer, and, most notably, a professional boxer in his teens to help support his struggling family. His broken nose wasn't the result of a stunt or makeup. It came from real fights. Fighting wasn't a hobby, it was survival. That raw strength stayed with him throughout his career. On the set of Zorba the Greek, the iconic beach scene required Quinn to carry massive logs, so heavy they normally took 2 men. Instead of using camera tricks or body doubles, Quinn insisted on doing it himself. Even the local Greek laborers, hired as extras, were stunned by his strength. Director Elia Kazan, who worked with Quinn on Viva Zapata, put it simply, "Tony doesn't act tough. He is tough. His strength comes from a life of labor, not from a Hollywood gym." His physical confidence never faded with age. While filming The Guns of Navarone at age 46, Quinn tackled a dangerous cliff climbing scene himself, despite the stunt coordinator's warnings. Even into his 50s and 60s, Quinn insisted on doing his own physically demanding scenes, a rarity in an industry that usually pushes stars into cushy, protected roles as they age. But what made Anthony Quinn truly unique was that he never tried to maintain a macho image. Unlike actors who carefully curated their personas, Quinn wasn't afraid to show vulnerability. He could portray warriors and tough men with raw conviction, then turn around and express deep emotion without fear of seeming weak. That self-assured masculinity, powerful yet emotionally open, set him apart. Actress Sophia Loren, who starred with Quinn in several films, once said, "Anthony had the body of a warrior and the soul of a poet. He could lift you with one arm, then talk about art and philosophy. With such sensitivity, it would catch people off guard." In his autobiography, Quinn wrote, "I've played boxers, laborers, and strong men because I understand their world. Before Hollywood, my hands were calloused from real work. I've carried real loads, thrown real punches, and felt real hunger. When I portray these men, I'm not pretending, I'm remembering." Anthony Quinn didn't need to act tough. He was tough, through and through. 6. Lee Marvin. Before Lee Marvin ever stepped onto a movie set, he had already survived some of the most brutal combat of World War II. As a Marine in the Pacific Theater, Marvin served with the 4th Marine Division and fought in the hellish Battle of Saipan. There, he was shot by machine gun fire, an injury that severed his sciatic nerve and left him with a lifelong limp. He rarely spoke about the war, but when he did, he didn't glamorize it. "I got shot in the ass and sent home," he once said. Anyone who says they enjoyed combat is either a liar or a damn fool. That kind of raw honesty was Marvin's signature, both on screen and off. He brought that same blunt realism to his acting. Directors and fellow actors quickly learned he wasn't pretending to be tough. He was tough. His portrayals in films like The Dirty Dozen, Point Blank, and The Killers felt unsettlingly real because he wasn't acting out violence. He was channeling what he'd lived through. Director John Boorman, who worked with him on Point Blank, said, "Lee understood violence in a way most actors never will. He didn't dramatize it. He exposed it for what it really was. Fast, ugly, and final." On set, Marvin carried himself like a man who had nothing to prove, but everything to remember. His quiet intensity made even seasoned actors nervous. James Coburn once said, "When Lee walked onto set, everything changed. There was something in his presence that warned you not to mess with him. It wasn't an act, it was real." Marvin's off-screen life only added to his legend. He was infamous for bar fights and heavy drinking. While filming in Oregon, he once got into a brawl with an entire group of lumberjacks. Well into his 40s, he held his own until the state police broke it up. The next day, he arrived on set battered but on time, refusing medical treatment or schedule changes. To Marvin, showing up injured wasn't a problem, it was just life. Yet behind the violence and bravado was a surprisingly thoughtful man. Director Samuel Fuller recalled that Marvin could discuss Hemingway, Nietzsche, or war strategy with startling depth. He'd talk philosophy 1 minute and then show you how to take down a guy with one move the next, Fuller said. His intellect, paired with his combat-hardened past, gave him a complexity that few actors could match. Lee Marvin didn't craft a tough guy image. He didn't need to. The war had already done that for him. When he stared down a villain or issued a threat on screen, you believed him, because he'd already lived through worse. As Roger Ebert once put it, when Lee Marvin threatens someone in a movie, you believe it, because Lee Marvin could actually carry out that threat. 7. James Coburn. He was the smiling threat. the kind of man who didn't need to shout or swing fists to remind you he was dangerous. In an era where toughness was often loud and scowling, Coburn stood out by doing the opposite. He was lean, calm, and cool. But behind that relaxed grin was a storm most didn't see coming. Raised during the Great Depression, Coburn knew hardship early. But instead of turning bitter, he developed a quiet confidence and a razor-sharp presence. His danger was never loud. It simmered just beneath the surface. What truly set him apart was his deep bond with martial arts legend Bruce Lee. The two trained together seriously, often sparring like true fighters rather than teacher and student. Coburn didn't just learn martial arts, he lived it. On screen, he was the embodiment of calm menace. Whether riding alongside Steve McQueen in The Magnificent Seven or channeling secret agent swagger in Our Man Flint, Coburn had a way of letting his opponents know he was in control and enjoying it. His threat wasn't explosive. It was measured, precise, and far more unsettling. Coburn was the man who smiled while sizing you up and never missed. 8. John Wayne. John Wayne's tough guy image wasn't a Hollywood invention. It was a reflection of who he really was. Long before he became the Duke, he was Marion Morrison, raised in the hard-edged landscapes of early 20th century Iowa and California. Life in those days meant physical labor, long hours, and little comfort. That upbringing shaped a man who would come to embody rugged American masculinity on screen, not through acting alone, but through genuine grit. Standing 6 feet 4 inches with a naturally imposing build, Wayne first made a name for himself not in film, but on the football field. He earned a scholarship to the University of Southern California, where his strength and athleticism quickly stood out. Injuries eventually ended his athletic career, but his size and work ethic got him hired as a prop man and stunt performer in early Hollywood. Set crew members often watched him lift and move props that took 2 or 3 men to handle. From the beginning, Wayne wasn't just playing strong, he was strong. As his acting career took off, Wayne never shied away from physical risk. He performed many of his own stunts well into his 50s and 60s, a rarity for a leading man of his status. During the filming of The Alamo, he insisted on doing a dangerous horsefall himself, resulting in cracked ribs. Instead of taking time off, he had them taped and kept working, while also directing the film. Director John Ford, a longtime collaborator, once said, "Duke's toughness isn't an act. I've seen him work in desert heat that sent half the crew to the hospital, then show up the next day without complaint. He's made of something different." One of the most harrowing examples of Wayne's physical endurance came during The Conqueror, 1956, filmed in Utah, downwind from U.S. nuclear test sites. The cast and crew were unknowingly exposed to radioactive fallout. Of the 220 people involved in the film, 91 later developed cancer, including Wayne, who eventually died of stomach cancer. Still, he never publicly blamed the shoot, nor slowed down. His commitment to physically demanding roles continued for years, long after signs of illness began to surface. In The Greatest Story Ever Told, 1965, Wayne tore shoulder ligaments while filming a scene. He refused to stop. Co-star Max von Sydow recalled, "John simply had it bandaged during lunch and came back to finish the scene. There was never a question of him quitting." Perhaps the clearest glimpse of his real toughness came in 1964, when he had a lung and several ribs removed due to cancer. Just months later, he was back on set for The Sons of Katie Elder, again refusing a stunt double. Director Henry Hathaway remembered warning him about the risks. Wayne replied, "Either I do my own stunts or you get someone else." That was that. Even his critics respected his physical courage. Kirk Douglas, who clashed with Wayne politically, once said, "Disagree with his views all you want, but don't question the man's toughness." I saw him work through things that would have flattened most men. John Wayne didn't just play the American hero, he lived like one. Pain, injury, even cancer couldn't break him, and that made his legend more real than most. 9. Bruce Lee. He didn't just act dangerous, he was danger in motion. His strikes were so fast, cameras had to film him in slow motion just to capture the impact. Directors begged him to slow down, not for drama, but because the lens couldn't keep up. Born in San Francisco and raised on the gritty streets of Hong Kong, Lee grew up fighting. By the time Hollywood noticed him, he had already faced more real combat than most action stars ever pretended to. But instead of being celebrated, he was typecast, reduced to side roles in a world still clinging to stereotypes. Bruce didn't fight back with words. He fought with action. He created Jeet Kune Do, a revolutionary martial art built on efficiency, adaptability, and destruction. On set, cocky stuntmen who tested him quickly regretted it. There was no showing off, just precise, painful reminders of who they were dealing with. Lee was more than muscle. He was a philosopher, a tactician, a visionary who saw combat as both survival and expression. His presence radiated certainty. There was no act. He was exactly who he appeared to be. Then, at just 32, Bruce Lee died under mysterious circumstances. Some blame fate. Others whisper conspiracy. But one truth is clear. Bruce Lee wasn't just ahead of his time. He was too powerful for it. The dragon didn't burn out. He broke through. 10. Oliver Reed. Oliver Reed wasn't just a tough guy. He was British cinema's wildest storm. A walking powder keg with alcohol as his fuse, Reed didn't just flirt with chaos, he lived in it. Born into filmmaking royalty, he could have coasted on charm. Instead, he carved his legend in bar fights, bruises, and booze-soaked mayhem. On screen, Reed was magnetic, raw, intense, unpredictable. Whether playing a brute or a broken man, there was always the sense he wasn't acting. Directors feared his volatility. Co-stars kept their distance. Bartenders braced for impact. His off-camera life became myth. He once brawled with an entire rugby team and held his own. He drank like it was war and dared life to keep up. Eventually, it couldn't. In 1999, while filming Gladiator, Reed dropped dead after a legendary drinking challenge. A heart attack silenced him. But not his legend. He didn't die quietly. He died exactly as he lived, on his own terms. Oliver Reed was the last of the true cinematic hellraisers. If you enjoyed this glimpse into Hollywood's golden age, don't forget to like, subscribe, and step into the next story. There's always more behind the curtain.